Peter Dutton says no to the voice to Parliament. Julia Leeser resigns from the front bench. Ken Wyatt also resigns from the Liberal Party, and the Liberals had a massive once-in-100-year loss in the Aston By-election. All of this and more coming up.
Arriving to voice a loud no. Peter Dutton wins the majority support of Liberal MPs to campaign against the referendum.
They changed the constitution. They're stuck with that for a long time. It's entrenched there and it's very hard to remove. And that makes people very wary of voting for change.
The Leader of the Opposition has, with every utterance that he has made, sought to undermine support.
Is it a referendum on the government? Is it all about local issues? Saturday's result suggests voters didn't buy the coalition cost of living message.
Wait, can I have one? Can I have one?
You're going to cover up.
It's not going to happen.
Hello everybody and welcome back to the AuspolChats podcast, the show where we try to make sense of the madness that is Australian politics. My name is Jack.
My name's Olivia.
I'm Aaron.
Luke.
And today we have got a whole bunch of different things to talk about that we've just discussed in the intro. But I think to get straight into it, obviously the Liberal Party has formally said no to the voice to Parliament. Obviously we were speculating on that in the last episode where we just basically talked about the whole voice to Parliament, which if you haven't seen, then make sure you go and check out our previous video where we go into more depth about it. But we all speculated, at least in some regard, that either Dutton would say, we would have a reluctant yes. Some of us said that he would say no. I think who was the one that actually said no?
I said no, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. So I think Luke had the most accurate prediction out of all of us in saying that Dutton would just outright reject it. And on that note, did you want to kind of discuss about, why do you think...
I was the psychic that figured it out.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
why did you think Dutton said no? What do you think the Liberal Party...
Before you do that though,
yeah.
Can we get the editor to go through and do a playback and see what everyone said?
Yeah.
Just play it right before this.
Turns out I'm the only one who got it wrong, everybody else got it right.
That's a good point. We'll do that. We'll do a recap. Look, do you
Begrudgingly support.
I'm not hopeful.
I don't think he will either. I don't think he is going to. So, after that very lovely recap that we just had, I think that you wanted to start talking a bit about the Liberal Party's position on the no, considering that, again, you were the psychic that said...
that's right, that's what the question was.
The psychic said no, so what do you think about that?
Primarily, you look at the way the Liberals were the last election. It was an election of climate, it was an election of moving back to the centre, and they went, no, we're going to go more conservative. And they lost their voter base. Well, they didn't lose their voter base, they gained, well, they still kept their conservative base, but everybody they needed to win the election, they put offside. And I think you look at that, and I think it's just this trend of the Liberals continuing to move towards more conservative politics to try and, what they see as appeasing their base when actually they're turning off the electorate. And the second point is, the Liberal Party is now led by the guy who walked out on the national apology. So that's the reason I feel that it's become a no.
Yeah, and I think as well in terms of the Liberal Party stance, I mean, look, they've been playing very interesting games with the whole thing. I think, dancing around the issue, just saying, look, we have questions. We've even had a lot of the front benchers who have just been saying, look, we're taking a different approach to this than the National Party, other than outright saying no. We're just going to be asking the questions that the Australian people have on their mind and all of that stuff. But now, only a few days after those front benchers were saying all this, we then just got the outright no. Which apparently, according to insiders within the Liberal Party, and then also who were following the conversation fairly closely, they were saying that they had no idea that Dutton was even going to make that position clear, or that the party room was going to make that position clear. So we know how very little moderates there are in the Liberal Party now, and I think it's pretty safe to say that the majority of the party room do support that position. So I guess, how does this no from the Liberal Party make it a bit more... I mean, how does this affect the way that this vote's going to go? How will this vote go across the line, do we think?
I think that every referendum that hasn't had bipartisan support has failed. I think this will be the one that bucks the trend. Because if the Liberals are going to be the main opposing voice to the voice, they're not united. there's very strong vocal support in the party. You've got folks like Bridget Archer, the member for Bass, I think it is.
Yeah.
She's going, yeah, the voice is important. We need to be fighting for that. You've got the Liberals in Tasmania, Jeremy Rockcliffe, I think is his name, the Premier of Tasmania.
Yeah.
He's going, we're going to be backing the voice. We're going to be campaigning for it.
Yeah.
And I read on the ABC the other day that there's 2 other Liberal state leaders that will be supporting the voice, but I'm not 100% sure. I think it's Victoria and South Australia. I couldn't tell you who those other 2 are, but it goes to show how not ununited. What's the word?
How much disunity.
Disunity. It shows how much disunity there is.
Divided. That's better way to express it.
There shows how much division there is in that opposing voice.
Yeah.
So I think that if you've got one side that's highly organised going, this is why we need the voice, and the side that's opposing it can't agree on whether to oppose it or not, I don't think that affects it passing through the referendum.
Yeah. I mean, did anyone else have any commentary on that? I think...
Saying it's hopeful for us because, now it's only Tasmania that actually has a Liberal government. So maybe people are getting a bit more progressive.
Yeah.
And even that one Liberal, state parliament is still supporting, progressive ideals like this voice, so...
Yeah, and I also think as well that with the recent result, because we'll go into this a little bit later in the podcast, we're kind of jumping the gun a little bit here, but in terms of the Aston by-election, right, I mean, first time it's ever happened in 100 years that the government was able to take away a seat from the opposition. So I think that in terms of, I think that was kind of a referendum a bit on Dutton. Even Dutton said himself that it was a test of his leadership, which, as we all know, Malcolm Turnbull said that back in 2016 after that whole Super Saturday by-election, and it was a complete failure for him, and it was a test of his leadership that inevitably led to his downfall. But anyway, aside from that point, I think that in terms of the way that people have just outright rejected Dutton's leadership, I think is a positive thing for the Voice campaign anyway, because I think irrespective, this gives us kind of a bit of a hint of that, irrespective of whether or not the Liberals supported or we're going to say no to it, I think that the people anyway were just going to vote for the Voice in their own way, or they were going to make up their own mind, irrespective of bipartisan support. So, I mean, we know that some other people, we have Clive Palmer today, not today, but the other day, saying that he was going to finance the No campaign
I wouldn't expect anything less.
So,
not surprising.
Maybe you should focus on making his campaign successful
Yeah.
first.
Yeah. Because again, but that doesn't really mean that much though, because we all know, the failure that
No
it
one
was.
likes Clive Palmer, so why is it matter?
And
So, I don't understand that.
He was listed as a Queensland treasure. Treasure.
Really? There you go.
That's a treasure, really.
National treasure, Queensland treasure, one of the 2.
We don't have many.
No. Look, I don't think his nickel workers would really see him as a treasure, because a lot of the other parts of the Yes vote as well, a lot of the big corporations as well have supported the Yes side, and I know a lot of, Ash Barty and a few other famous Australian athletes have also been interested in campaigning for the Yes side. Do we think that the celebrity endorsements, the big corporations being in support of that, do you think that would change a few people's minds or sway a few people's minds?
Yeah, I feel like it's building up public momentum, and I feel like more people are going to be open to doing it. I think that's also what we saw back in, I want to say 2014, when the gay marriage referendum was being done. I feel like there was a lot of public momentum that actually did push people to say yes, and I feel like that's what's going to happen here as well a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm the opposite.
You really?
I reckon endorsements bring it into the public consciousness. But if I'm walking down the street and I see a sign that says Woolworths is supporting the Voice referendum, I'm going to go, you know what? If Woolies is backing it, Ash Barty's backing it, Combank's backing it, Luke Stewart's backing it. It's just, to me, it's... I think you're right in a certain way, is it puts it in people's minds, but whether it actively impacts their decision to support it or not support it.
I feel like if you put that into conservative areas, they're gonna be there everyone else is against me. I'm the only one who's gonna be sticking up for Australian values, etc.
I agree with you on that.
It's the whole go woke, go broke.
Yeah, it would be that kind of mentality, that kind of discussion. So that's probably what would happen there. But I feel like overall, it would still at least bring that more into the public thing, and I feel like more people would be kind of pushed to make a decision on that.
Yeah.
Because I feel like the people who are already like voting no are going to be skeptical. Sorry, I'm going to speak a bit louder this
Yeah,
time.
that's okay.
The people who are already voting like yes for it are going to be skeptical of the big corporations. Because as soon as you said that, celebrities, corporations, you're like,
Yeah.
you know, it's all capitalism in the end. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, as much as all the big banks supported the same-sex marriage plebiscite, as well as a whole other different corporations and businesses and celebrities and whatnot, I don't think it was their endorsement alone that was getting people over the line. I think at that point in Australia's time and place that we were all ready for that same-sex marriage. I mean, arguably, it didn't even really need to be a plebiscite because it was so overwhelmingly in favour of that plebiscite. But that's that's a different thing. But I, in terms of what you were saying, Luke, I think, putting it in the public eye, putting it in the public consciousness, I think it would make people a bit more aware that this is a big issue. But I also think it could have the opposite effects, like what Aaron was saying, about, people who are already either on the fence or against it, saying, basically victimising themselves, going, well, everyone is against me, and how do you convince people like that to get on your side? It's very difficult.
What I ultimately think is I think it'll just what's the way to put it? It's like it'll be like a strengthening effect. Like it'll strengthen whoever. Like if it'll bring like the public momentum into force, and I think that's going to strengthen individuals regardless of what they think. If they think no, they're more likely to vote no. If they think yes, like, oh well, like for most cases, because they might be, oh great, look at that big capitalist organization supporting what's popular. What a shock. But I don't think it's really going to like change people from saying yes ultimately.
And I also think too, the other thing that comes from this as well is that Dutton has been firing out on all cylinders on this no campaign as well. He's basically been, he's coined the term the Canberra voice. The Canberra voice term didn't even exist before Dutton started to show up and started saying the Canberra voice.
Every 5 seconds.
And in an email that, ironically enough, my mum got, because I think everyone who likes Peter Dutton's Facebook page is on the mailing list, and they usually just get out.
Jack, don't out your mum.
No. I mean, no.
There's nothing wrong with liking an alternative politician.
Yeah.
Do I like Peter Dutton? No. But do I support somebody's right to listen to Peter Dutton? It's democracy. Essentially, on the email itself that came through, it said that, which is already kind of ticks off the radar a little bit, or sets off the red flags in me a little bit about how they're going to go about the campaign, in the sense that the email said that change to the Constitution is incredibly, sacred and important, and that you should really think about it before you cast your vote. The Constitution, once the Constitution is changed, it cannot be undone, which is, that's what the actual email said. Right.
So, which is why I think is that for anyone who was listening to this who doesn't know too much about constitutions, you can change them and you can amend them. It's just obviously a bit more difficult to do so, but that's just blatantly wrong. So I found that email was really did show how the Liberals were going to try and campaign for their no side. Do we think that that they're going to start spouting a bit more misinformation about the voice, trying to muddy the waters a little bit more?
Yep.
What do we think?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that'd be a regular Dutton tactic.
Usual Lib tactic.
Very female.
No, but genuinely.
Is it?
Because you think back to like John Howard and stuff, and they were asking for an apology. It's like, it's not my fault. Like, well, it is. You're angry against it.
Yeah. So I think as well in terms of, Dutton's very strong stance, because again, a lot of people within the party room are saying, this was a test of his leadership. This was a test of his strength as a leader to actually have an opinion on something, not be a centrist, of course. And he just went about it, just the no camp and whatnot. He's trying to appeal to his party, trying to appeal to his base. But this ended up leading to 2 big resignations. We had Julian Leeser, the Shadow Attorney General, resigning, as well as Ken Wyatt resigning from the Liberal Party entirely. Do we think that these 2 resignations show that bit of divisiveness that Olivia was hinting towards the Liberal Party?
Absolutely. I'd agree.
And how much of an effect do we think this might have on the vote as a whole?
I don't think it'll have much of an effect on the vote, but I think it'll have an effect on how effective the opposition is to the voice. Like, Ken Wyatt was the former Indigenous Affairs Minister.
Yeah.
Yep.
And he's resigned from the party because he lost a seat at the last election. He's resigned from the party in protest. Julian Leeser is the top law guy for the government. He's the Attorney General. He's resigned in protest. I think those are very big losses for Dutton because it's the centre point of his argument.
Yeah.
Those are two big figures to lose.
Yeah.
Yeah, like huge figures.
Yeah,
to
because
lose.
it's an Indigenous affairs issue that's concerning like the founding legal document. If you lose both of those, like two of your biggest voices on that issue within your party, it leaves you in a bit of a bad spot.
And also Julian Leeser also was part of some of the planning documentations with The Voice. Part of some of those studies going out to remote and regional communities to try and figure out what model is working best for them. So I think the argument that Leeser made, unless one of you is able to correct me, I think the argument that Leeser made was that he still wants a voice to Parliament, and he completely rejects the opposition's idea of the voice. I think he just had one issue with the government's proposal of the voice, and that was the whole executive branch part of it. He should remove the executive government part, like being able to be heard by the executive government. But I think that was his stance. But other than that, though, he obviously outright rejects his party's motion. I mean, that's a big thing to do. I mean, from your opposition, like that's like if you win the next election, you're basically on the front bench. You're a minister and whatnot, so that's a huge thing to do for your career. As much as we like to back out Liberal politicians and whatnot, I think, and for sometimes for very good reason, I think that in terms of Julian Leeser's thing, he took, and I think Penny Wong said this as well, but he took his ideas over his career.
Yeah, he did.
And he did the right thing in his mind, and I think he did the right thing in a lot of people's minds, and gave up that career for the backbench.
Yeah, I agree, because I think what happened was he said himself that he's choosing to leave not out of like petty politics, but he's choosing to do it based off of those ideals. And even though consistently he has had like he's like as it comes with being a opposition member, he has had issues with how the Albanese government has been handling the voice, but he's always like maintained trying to work with them to try to actually put it through, which I think actually does go to show that he does actually have the principle of wanting it to get it through. And so honestly, I can respect his decision quite a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of nice to see this divisiveness. Like, I know it's bad. No,
I mean, to be more petty, yes.
No, but you know what I mean? Because like every issue, it gets so exhausting to see every issue bogged down to a Labour or Liberal thing.
Yeah.
It's like, can we just focus on politics rather than party politics, right?
Yeah.
Because nothing ever gets done then because it's making the other person look bad.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's it. And with those party politics, I mean, there were quite a bit of those. I mean, well, not. I was trying to do a smooth segue there, but it didn't quite work out. In terms of party politics, in the party room, there was a stipulation amongst the Libs, because this was another thing I think we were talking about in the podcast, whether or not they were going to make it, in the previous one anyway, whether or not the Liberal Party was going to make it a conscious vote between all of the members, and they can just do whatever they want. I felt like that probably would have been the safest option for them if they wanted to do that. But obviously there's a stipulation amongst the front benches that they have to vote no, and all the back benches have a conscious vote. So what do we think of that? Is that a bit, tyrannical in the whole, the party of free speech, that you can say what you want and, it's okay if we don't agree, but, we can at least still be friends and whatnot,
I mean, I don't think it's... I mean, in this country, we don't vote for the Prime Minister, we vote for the party. I don't think it's tyrannical to say that the front benches have to vote for it because, well, they are the leadership team of that party. If the party's position is to vote no, well then I'm not opposed to the leader saying to the leadership team, you have to vote no, because we vote for party politics. We vote for positions, not individuals. Because yes, I mean, I go to the ballot and I go, do I want Karen Andrews or do I want the Labor bloke? Do I want the green bloke? I mean, yeah, I'm picking that individual, but in reality, I know that that person is going to attempt to form a majority for another person. So I know that I'm picking a person, they're going to go to Canberra, and whoever's on their team is going to form government. Like, I know that. I'm not going to go, well, I really like Albo, but I'm going to vote for Karen because I'm not really voting for Albo, I'm voting for Peter Dutton.
Yeah.
So...
I mean, does any of us have any thoughts on that? I mean, the whole stipulation between the front bench getting that, mandatory no vote and the back bench getting the freedom to choose what they want to do?
I don't think it's too, surprising, to be honest. If that is the case, I don't think it's surprising. Part of me thinks it's a little bit unfortunate that front benches might feel compelled to go into that. But I think I agree with what Luke's saying. It's kind of a reality when you do accept this position that you're going to be kind of constrained by the party politics quite a lot, and you're really going to have that pressure. So, as regretful as it is, I can understand it as it is within the unfortunate reality of politics as a whole.
We also had another major thing about the Aston by-election. It was a test of Dutton's leadership, obviously, as I said before, and it was a huge thing. Huge thing. There's only once in 100 years that has ever happened that the government was able to take a seat off the opposition. And for those who don't know Aston very well, like I didn't before I had to look up the stuff, it was a very safe Liberal seat, and they were thinking that they were going to keep the seat but just on a bit of a tighter margin than they did before and not completely lose it. So what do we think of that historic loss, and what does that say about Dutton's leadership as a whole? As the man himself says, it was a test of his leadership.
I think you have to take the circumstances into account. If you look at the electoral map of Melbourne, because Aston is in Melbourne, the map is essentially all red for Labor, and you got a couple of green, couple of teals in there, right? But the main point is it's a red map. Pretty much all of Victoria's population is in Melbourne, right? Yeah, you've got regional centres, you've got Geelong, but at the end of the day, Melbourne is the most populated part. It's where the most representation is, right?
Yeah.
Now, you think even though Dan Andrews won his last election, or the most recent one, he's on his fourth term now, and with the lockdown measures and whatnot, it was a huge test for Dutton because you've got party fatigue. Labor can't be in there for years and years and years. That seat was held by the Liberals for almost 100 years. Labor won it once in the 80s or the 90s or something.
Yeah.
So effectively, it's been a Liberal seat for its entire existence. Now, Labor pretty much control all of Melbourne in representation, and they couldn't do it under fatigue. They've held that seat for years and years. It used to be a Liberal frontbencher. I mean, yeah, it was Alan Tudge and he had a few scandals, but at the end of the day, if you voted to get him back in, you were probably going to vote for the next Liberal too. I think that's huge. I'm surprised there wasn't a leadership challenge the second they lost Aston.
Yeah.
So,
especially when, and I'm sorry, I know I keep reiterating the point, but Dutton made the same mistake that Malcolm Turnbull did when he said that this was a test of his leadership. I think that, I'm surprised there wasn't much of a leadership contest. But to be honest, who does replace Dutton, even if there was a leadership contest?
I think who wants to replace Dutton?
Yeah.
I mean, if I was going to put a bet down, I would bet on Labor winning the next election. Regardless of what's going to happen in the next 3-4 years, Labor will most likely win the election because of how in shambles the Liberal Party is. They've just crapped the bed.
It's absolutely decimated, I feel. Yeah. And I think that's what the Aston... Sorry, do you want to talk?
No.
So that's why I think that's the overall shattering, for lack of a better word, of the Liberal Party, the Liberal National Party, is kind of what Aston kind of represented. I don't think that Peter Dutton was wrong in saying it was a massive test for his leadership. I just probably don't think he should have said it because that kind of conveys a lot of vulnerability that he probably does not need right now.
No.
If there's one thing that he needs to do to appeal to his base is he needs to show that he's here and he's going to pull the party together. And unfortunately, with stuff like Aston and him admitting he's kind of, for lack of better words, not going very well, then it kind of just shows how much the Liberal Party is really falling apart, and as the media keeps saying, need to do some soul-searching.
There's a lot of soul-searching in the Liberal Party. You were going to say, Olivia?
Albo did slay Dutton. He said after 10 years of being part of the problem, Dutton now fails to be a part of the solution.
Okay.
Absolutely
based.
slaughtered in the media.
Yeah, so I think, and that was also too during his Alice Springs visit as well, which he's been going on and on and on about. You know, I've been in Alice Springs more times than Albo has been. You know, he only had he's only been here on the plane for a couple of hours, while I've been here for days. I've been here with locals on the ground and all of that stuff. And he's been really trying to grill Albo on the whole Alice Springs issue and whatnot. And
I just don't think it's working either.
I think that's not necessary. To me, it's not necessarily grilling Albo. To me, it's grilling it in the minds of the public that Dutton is a boots on the ground people's man. He's trying to drill it in that I'm the guy that can fix your problems. I don't think it's necessarily trying to get back at Albo like, oh, Albo's not in this. He's not seeing the heartland. He's not seeing the problems that are happening out here. He's just going, I am here. I can help with the problem.
Yeah, it's more like him saying that Albo's not here, but I am. The emphasis on the I am.
Yeah.
Not.
Yeah, it's not emphasis on the Albo's not here. It's the emphasis on the I'm here.
That's it.
Dutton is a people's person unless you're an asylum seeker, and then he will take your phone off you when you're in detention centres. So
Yeah, that's true. That's
really trying to push that image, isn't he?
Yeah, well, and he also, because again, this is part of the rebranding of Dutton, isn't it? It's like, he was the big, tough, almost militaristic-like man. He was going to keep our country safe. He was going to keep the borders safe, and now he's starting to get across this softer image of himself, that he cares about, your local communities, your local, and like all the other issues on the ground, as Luke was saying. But we've just had such an ingrained image of him for so long, for over the past 10 years of being like not military advisor, defense minister,
the enforcer of the government.
The enforcer of the government. That's the best way to describe it. And I don't think people, especially in the Aston By-election, I don't think people are buying that like personality switch or that personality change.
No,
I don't think many people are.
Image-wise, it's probably a bit personal, but if you're in politics, everything's personal. Isn't it? But it's even the way he holds himself. Whenever you saw him in interviews, he's always like very stoic and like there's no that's kind of mean, but you know what I mean?
No personality.
It's no warmth coming through.
Yeah.
He's always very straight talking and this is the facts, and then he wants to like show himself as someone who's going out to community and really there for the people.
Which I really feel like that Dutton worked at a time and place back from 2013 to 2022, to 2019.
Yeah.
Where Australians really did rally around that type of tough figure, and tough on borders, tough on immigration and all that stuff. And obviously the Dutton of then and the Dutton of now, it's like Australia's in two different places
different
now.
Circumstances, completely different contexts. I think what Australians kind of want right now is reassurance more than anything. Like a reassurance that kind of everything's going to be okay with like housing going out of control, with the rights of minorities, the economy after COVID, actual like safety from COVID itself, infrastructure building. Like they want reassurance more than they want the tough guy, I guess is what I mean.
Yeah, and I guess a more softer type of, more gentle type of leadership like that Albanese is pulling. Well, anyway, the public image. Anyway, I'm not too sure how it's like all behind closed doors. We don't know
That's
that
right.
yet.
But at least at least how that's.
Well, I'm just going to say, as someone who's actually spoken to Dutton.
Oh, here we go, exclusive.
Flex. No, it's the same. It's the same when you talk to him. He's still very stoic.
But it reminds me of like the battle between Albo and ScoMo. It's these blokes. They're two footy dads. Like, it's just, they're a couple of old fellas, you just want to have a beer with them. Like, ScoMo, he named the Jet Shark One after his team.
Yeah.
He takes his daughter to the games. Like,
did that actually happen? Did he name the
the
Jet
Prime
Shark
Minister's
One?
Jet is Shark One.
Oh my god.
Anyway,
I didn't know that. That's great.
But,
That's pretty funny.
like, I mean, you look at ScoMo and his personality and his charisma compared to the stone-faced former police officer, military style of Dutton. It's a huge difference, and it's clear. I mean, I know ScoMo became deeply unpopular towards the end of his term, but if Dutton's already this unpopular before even attempting an election, That's hugely concerning for the Liberal Party.
Yeah, before his first year is up, basically.
That's right.
And it's also like the polls too, they just keep shifting towards that. And I know polls aren't everything, but I think we're a little bit beyond the point now of, unreliable polls. Because a lot has changed in polling since 2016 onwards, a lot of the methodology, a lot of the way that we interpret, the way that we read the data, it's all changed.
And it's not like... And even since then, it's not like polls are taken as gospel anymore. Back then, they were like seen as hard science. Now they're like, there is margin for error.
Because we always see the argument made of the honeymoon period.
Yeah.
We've seen that multiple times. And yes, that is true to a certain degree, that most governments do experience some type of a honeymoon period before they end up going down in the polls and all that stuff. I mean, Scott Morrison had the same thing. Tony Abbott had the same thing when he got elected. Back in Kevin 07, Kevin 07 had a very popular stint in his polls in that honeymoon period, but eventually it goes down and it ebbs and flows and all that stuff. But
John Howard had a massive one. He started off incredibly strong, but he fell massively.
And that's the thing. I think a lot of, and you'll see this a lot in a lot of the printing press, a lot of the old guard media, that this is a very extended honeymoon period. And I don't know. We're now nearly. The budget's going to come up in June or July.
Yeah.
So this is nearly going to be their first year, and there's going to be year-long recaps about what the Albanese government have done. So, for a honeymoon period to last this long,
it's pretty impressive.
It's either it says a lot about Albo or it says a lot about their opposition, which I think it might be a combination of both.
To be fair, I think the rule of thumb is the honeymoon period ends when the first big issue comes up. The Voice is that first big issue. So I think the honeymoon period's over. I think that
we're in the test.
That we're in the test of whether it's Albo's grand or whether he's bad, and whether we want to vote for him. And I think you'll see that in the polls of he will still have high popularity, not because the honeymoon period is still going, but because of just I know I keep saying I don't want to live bash. I want to be impartial. I don't want to be biased. Yeah. But I mean, you look at how in shambles that the federal Liberal Party is currently in. They're not putting forward a case of we're ready to govern again.
Yeah.
Also, big thing with Albo as well at the moment, going off to the US with the nuclear subs and everything. When you got the cost of living crisis, housing crisis.
Yeah.
Just spending how much, billions on it?
Yeah. So I think that's an unfortunate. I mean, to be fair though, while the Albanese government was in opposition, they still supported AUKUS irrespective of, it was a bipartisan support. But irrespective of whether or not Albanese, their opposition even denied AUKUS, they would have still have gone through it anyway because there were contractual obligations from the US and the UK. When good old Bojo was still around and Lizzo didn't tank the economy in 40 days, and now we have
speedrunning, by the way.
We're speedrunning her prime ministership, and then we have Rishi Sunak now, who's
Who talks about job prospects with people at a soup kitchen?
Yeah, that's a bit of a. Do you mind telling us just a quick side tangent, because you know that clip of Rishi Sunak? Do you mind explaining that clip a little bit more?
I don't know what this clip is.
Yeah, me neither.
He was helping out at a soup kitchen. He was talking to this guy about what was it?
I think it was a homeless. It was a food bank.
Yeah.
Food bank in the UK, and obviously he's going there because he doesn't have enough money to be able to get food at home. And then Rishi thought it would have been an appropriate thing to start talking about. I think it was his job. It's like, oh, how you going looking for a job, mate? So far, how's your job going? It was very tone deaf.
Painful to watch.
I think it is. You can just see the guy go, I'm homeless. I'm just looking for a place to live.
Yeah.
He asked a homeless man if he works in business.
Oh.
And it's literally as he's handing him the food, and the guy's in proper jacket and everything.
Yeah, I'll put the clip into this podcast just to show.
Well, do you work in a business? Do you want some fruit?
No, I'm homeless. I'm actually a homeless person at the minute, but I'm interested in business.
Yeah, what kind of business?
Finance is good for the city, and when finance and stuff's doing well, we'll do well in London. So
yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah, that's absolutely right. So I used to work in finance, actually.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Investment bank.
Yeah, well, I did lots of different things.
Honestly, that's not as bad as what I thought it was going to be. He did he didn't stick the landing, but he didn't make it worse.
Look, I will say though, the homeless guy did actually handle that pretty well
Yeah.
in terms of like being questioned, like the tone deafness of the conversation. He handled himself pretty well.
You could just see him though. He's like, yeah, I'm homeless.
And then the fact that he's like, oh well, you know, I'm hoping I can make it through
Christmas.
Oh, that was
it's just
rough.
cringe to watch.
Yeah.
Mm.
Second-hand embarrassment.
There's obviously been a bit of a void that's been left after Ken White's resignation. So now a lot of people have been calling on for Jacinta Price to be the new Shadow Indigenous Affairs Minister. So as at the time of me editing this clip, there's actually been a bit of a development. So Jacinta Price is now the Shadow Indigenous Affairs Minister. She's been appointed to that portfolio by the Dutton opposition, giving the Nats an additional seat in the Shadow Cabinet. So, you know, while obviously the parts about speculating whether she will be or won't be part of the Shadow Cabinet is going to be a little bit dated right now, I still think that our discussion based on how she's going to affect the No campaign is still going to be very, very relevant. So we hope you guys still enjoy the rest of this clip, just given the fact that now what we are speculating on has now become reality. So, I mean, what do we think about that? Do we think that she would make it a decent, I shouldn't say decent, a good Indigenous Affairs Minister or Shadow Indigenous Affairs Minister? Or do we think that, because she's obviously been opposed to The Voice for quite a while. She's with the Nationals. She was there with David Littleproud when they said no. So what do we think?
What reasons did she give for it?
It was mainly more
symbolic, wasn't it? I can't quite remember that it wouldn't have real change and
the stuff we did talk about like last.
Yeah, it was like I think she said it was subservient to the government, not. I can't fully remember.
I think it was more of the fact that she was more talking about how she found it frustrating how, you know, like these I think the quote is something like socialists in their Gucci boots that go to these rural and regional communities to tell people in the dirt how they should live. That's her quote, not mine. So I think that's like kind of that elite, like that whole conflict between the elites and the working man, the average Indigenous Australian. You know, how's it going to affect them? How's it going to change the way that they live their lives? And that's more the issues that she has. So again, a lot of people have been saying that she should be there. What do we think?
Yeah, I agree. Can't get better than an Indigenous woman. I mean, you have the intersectionality as well. But also then you have both sides of the argument. She's not treating people as though they're a monolith. You know, it's not just all Indigenous think this way. So, not all Indigenous people, sorry. Pulling a Luke there. No. But it's not treating all Indigenous people as a monolith that because they're Indigenous they automatically have to support The Voice. They should be able to debate it amongst themselves, you know?
Because then we all know Lydia Thorpe. I think we did talk about this in the last podcast. How she has affectionately said no to The Voice.
Affectionately.
I don't know if that's the right word to describe it, but you know, she has said no.
Heavy quotations around the word affectionately.
Yeah, she's definitely been very opposed to The Voice.
Yes.
And she's called it a bit more of a progressive no, as opposed to just a bigoted no, like she claims that Dutton and that lot are doing. So, you know, and again, you're right. I mean, not every Indigenous person is going to think that this voice is the best idea under the sun. And not every Indigenous person is going to agree with how it should work out. Some Indigenous people think that it doesn't do enough. Some people think that it might be too powerful, or who knows, right?
Well, so that's what Jacinta Price I think has said. Like she's like mainly like levied her criticisms based off of how she feels that it might be relatively ineffective. And I think like coming from the perspective of it from an Indigenous person, I think that's quite a valid concern to have. I think after everything that happened, the way that they have that the Labour government has talked it up, it is fair enough to want to question that. I'm not too sure I agree, but I can understand where she's coming from at least. And I think that actually like she does strike me as at least like wanting a bit more from it, at the least. It doesn't feel like it's a complete hard no, but it does feel like she wants to like understand it more and she wants more out of it. And I think the way that she's kind of framed is like it's more of like a symbolic thing, and it's like little more than window dressing, to put it nicely, on the Constitution. And so I think within the Liberal Party, like Olivia said, like that's your strongest Indigenous voice now that Ken White's gone. and I think it's only natural that they would like try to rally around her when it comes to this kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, I think it's like what Susan Lee was saying. You know, it's not one big no; it's one of many yeses, which is an interesting way to do it. I think, Luke, you had a little bit of something to talk about with Susan Lee and her statements with Dutton's whole press conference when he was formally putting the Liberal Party position forward.
My point is that I think that they were too scared to say no. They were like, we're saying many... I think Dutton actually used the terms resounding no, but I'm pretty... to me, I think the Liberal Party, excluding Dutton, was too afraid to actively say no. So we're not saying no, it's many yeses. We're saying yes to Indigenous recognition. We're saying yes to local consultation. I think there was another couple of things that they said yes to, but what they said no was obviously the Canberra voice.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think my point is that Susan Lee is representing I don't know if Susan Lee's a moderate, but moderates on this issue. Susan Lee's representing that interest of, we're not saying no, we're saying yes, there's just one thing that we're saying no to. That's where I'm coming from.
And it was also keeping in mind as well, the Liberal Party said no to this voice when, ironically enough, they didn't... I mean, Dutton says they didn't have the detail. I mean, Dutton has always been clamouring on for months how, there's just not enough detail. The Prime Minister's not saying all the detail and blah, 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 blah. And we don't have enough information on it to make an informed decision. And despite having not enough information to make an informed decision, they still come out and say no anyway, when a lot of those questions could be answered, and even the wording of the question itself can still be changed relatively even closer towards the actual referendum date. So I think it's definitely, whatever path Dutton's going on, or whatever the Liberal Party's path is going on, it's definitely been a bit messier than I think most of us have anticipated, at least. Because I think, I think probably the easiest way they could have gotten out of it was everyone just leaving it to a conscious vote.
Yeah.
It would have been a no without saying no, like intrinsically. So, but yeah, that's kind of what Dutton does. He's the big strong man.
So I suppose the party they can't really leave it to a conscience vote. They've got to take an active position of whether they're going to support it or just disagree with it.
Yeah. So I think in terms of that, because we're slowly getting to, we've got around 10 minutes left. I think, was there anything in terms of Albo's campaign of The Voice that we have any criticisms of? Because there have been a few that have been going around, either some valid criticisms of not providing enough detail on certain wording in terms of like executive government and whatnot, in terms of being too broad about the question that's being put to the Australian people. Do we think that there are any other criticisms that could be levelled at this campaign, at the Yes campaign?
I have one main criticism. Why is Albo refusing to release the legal advice from the Solicitor General?
So this is another thing that has changed since I've been editing this video, and that is the Solicitor General's advice has been released to the public. All 100 pages of it in full have been, so if you're interested in checking it out, I definitely recommend doing so. It's a little bit of a long read. I know it's a bit like 100 pages, that's a lot, but it's definitely very important, especially when we're talking about The Voice in terms of its legality. And this is the same Solicitor General that the previous Liberal Party have been trying to rely on for the past 9 years to get legal advice on laws that it's passed over the course of its government. Essentially, what the Solicitor General said about The Voice is that it would not impose any obligations on the executive government to follow representations of The Voice or to consult with The Voice prior to developing any policy or making any decision, and also said that the chance of High Court rulings or High Court challenges would be very few and far between. Also stating as well that The Voice has no veto powers or anything like that to disrupt the flow of government, and even says that it is an enhancement of government procedure. So if you're interested in that, I definitely go and recommend and give it a look, because it has a lot more information of it in there. But that's just what has changed since since editing this podcast. So yeah, we'll go back to the show.
I'm pretty sure it's the Solicitor General.
Yeah.
Because I did read this the other day.
It is,
It's, the Solicitor General, he's supporting the voice, he's saying that we're doing a good job. But he's like, I'm confident that the Solicitor General will support what we're doing to the Constitution. If he's supporting it, and if he's going to support it, why won't you release the advice?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, and I feel like that's kind of, I mean, I don't invoke this name very lightly, but this is kind of not a ScoMo-esque type of thing to do, but you're definitely trying to say one thing while something's nagging at it in the background, you know, like you said. They're saying, yes, the Solicitor General does agree with us, but you won't release what they said. So I think that's definitely one thing as well. Were there any other criticism about Albo's side or the yes side? Because it's very important that they, you know, are able to take that criticism.
Yeah,
or if
I understand.
Yeah.
Personally, I think that one thing that's kind of like felt this entire time is Albanese has been really keeping his. I think the best way I can put it is his cards very close to his chest. He's been very, very minimal about everything, and it's an interesting political play. But I think that's also part of the problem. You can see it's a political play. He keeps his cards very close to his chest. He's not released the legal advice on the voice. He was very, very vague about the wording even before actually revealing it, and even then the wording is still it's a very simple question, which is, I think it's like politically it's deceptive is the wrong word, but it's the only one I really have where it's kind of like it's phrasing like a very big issue in a very small way, which is an interesting way to do it, but I don't know how to feel about it necessarily. And all in all, I feel like for how big of an issue it is, I feel like the most we hear about the discussion of it is from the LNP and not from the Labour Party. So I honestly want to see a lot more discussion from the Labour side, from the Labour government. And I don't know how to feel. Politically, I can see why Albanese is doing this, because when you do too much information when it comes to referendum, you're setting yourself up for more attacks. But also not doing that, how are people going to feel safe to, well, safe is maybe again the wrong word, but it's the only one I have. How are people going to feel safe to want to vote for that? So I don't know. I feel like he is in a rough spot, and I feel like he could be doing worse, but he also could be doing better. So I don't know exactly where it's kind of a shaky ground how I'm feeling about how Albanese has been handling this. I do think that overall he could have been more, maybe forthcoming about this entire thing, however.
Yeah.
That's generally how I feel about it.
Olivia, did you have any thoughts?
Not really. Basically the same thing as that withholding.
That's why you go first.
Because I piggybacked.
I mean, you went first in the last podcast, so I guess it's only fair, you know?
Yeah, because I mean, they've spoke about things in general.
Yeah.
So I don't see why they won't just release the full advice.
I feel as if I pretty much agree with Aaron in the sense that it opens him up more for attacks the more vague he keeps it, and the simpler that it becomes. Because I think he's open for attacks both ways. I think he sets himself up for attack and overall actually failure for the referendum if he releases too much information about it, like what happened with the Republic referendum, for example. And however, if he keeps it more simple, politically, looking at the history of referendums, that's a safer option. Yeah. But you can also see why people feel more uneasy about it. And that's kind of the point that I was getting to, in the sense that I think in the Republic debate, I think he didn't want history to repeat itself, and the fact that the Republic debate ended up turning into a simple question, which really the referendum was only, should Australia become a republic? And then obviously the opposition side of the government of the day was then saying, okay, well, what type of republic is it going to be? Are we still going to have the Governor General? Are we still going to have all of these other ceremonial roles when we leave the monarchy and whatnot? What's going to happen to our currency? And look, all of them are valid questions, I think, at the end of the day, when it comes to the raw legislation of the thing. I think it's definitely valid to do that. It's just that it muddied the waters enough where people are like, well, I don't know about this. Yeah. So I'm just going to back off from this. And arguably, that monarchy debate, I think that Albanese really did study that quite well, because
I think so.
Because he's been talking about this voice to Parliament since he was frontbencher in 2014.
Yeah.
So this is a big thing for him. So, I think
he's being as careful as he possibly can be.
Yeah.
But I think this comes with its own risks.
I think he's that's how he got into the prime ministership anyway. That's he was a very small target, very careful political operative.
Yeah.
As opposed to, Dutton, where it's a bit more brazen, a bit more,
aggressive.
a bit more aggressive, a bit more tough, a bit more out there.
If Dutton learned how to count, would have been him, not ScoMo.
That's true.
If he realised that he didn't have the numbers.
That's true. Actually, yeah, we would have. That's so true, actually, because between the whole Malcolm Turnbull, Peter Dutton, Scott Morrison coming through the wing, and Julie Bishop at one point entering the ring.
Yeah, it was a three-way contest.
There could have been a very good chance that Dutton possibly could have been the Prime Minister, and who knows what would have happened in the 2019 election. I have no idea how history would have changed, but
So does that mean there's an alternative universe where Dutton was Prime Minister?
Maybe.
For a short time.
For a short time, maybe. I mean,
let's hope it doesn't pass.
I mean, maybe, but even then, maybe the 2022 election would have been the same.
That's right.
Between Dutton and ScoMo.
Dutton could have won and beat out though.
We could have. Exactly. I mean, I guess that Dutton was definitely going to be a bit more, in terms of a political campaign, it's going to be always a bit more aggressive than ScoMo. I mean, look, ScoMo is very aggressive, but he usually kept the
in a different way.
In a different way. He's like the aggressive marketer. In a sense, which we also talked about in the first podcast, first episode of the podcast, the 2022 election review. Make sure you check that out as well. That's a year old now, but it's a great
aggressive marketer.
Aggressive marketer.
Sound a little bit admiring there, Jack.
Admiring Scott Morrison? No way, not in a million years. Not
aggressive marketer, Jack. But he was doing it just then, though.
No, I mean, look, you gotta.
ScoMo loves Queensland.
That's
I
right.
love Queensland.
So, closing thoughts on anything that we've discussed at all today. Who would like to begin? Would you like to begin, Olivia? Luke?
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah.
In closing, I don't think Dutton sees out until the next election. Then again, who's going to run? I think it'll be some poor sap that doesn't have a career or doesn't have a tangible path to the Prime Ministership. It'll be someone like
Angus Taylor.
Angus Taylor could be someone that is never going to be the Prime Minister. They'll ship up and make him the leader. But let's not try to thought something about Liberals in shambles. It's not going to affect the voice because it's not bipartisan. I think it'll pass.
There we go. Aaron, final thoughts.
I mean, not
Sorry, not to cut you off.
No, please cut me off.
I mean, honestly, not too different. I don't feel like Dutton's really holding the Liberal Party well together. I don't think he's really going to be. I don't really think he's offering a strong conservative alternative to Australian politics, and he is offering a strong one, but I don't think he's drawing enough support for it. Is his problem, and I don't think that I think that the LNP is kind of in a rough spot for quite a long time under this current direction of leadership, and I don't think that they're going to. I think they'll offer a strong opposition to the voice, but I don't think it's actually going to really change the outcome. I think they it's quite a strong opposition overall, but I don't know. I feel like maybe the way to phrase it is it'll be like a bull. It'll keep charging around, but it's still gonna stay within the pen.
Yeah.
And the pen, I guess the pen is the no vote. It'll be very small compared to the wider world.
That's a good analogy.
It took a while for me to get around to it, but I got there.
Yeah.
And I do feel like for the voice campaign, it could have been handled a little bit better by the government, but I can understand why they've been handling it the way they have. And the Aston By-election kind of shows how the Liberal Party continues to be in shambles, and I'm very interested to see how it lasts.
So we love using the word shambles in this podcast.
I do. It's the word of the episode.
We love it's like with shock jock radio presenters. They're in shambles. They're in shambles. This. They're in shambles.
Well, Jack, you love them so much, so of course, I had to honour your love for that word.
Of course. my love of shock jock radio hosts that I definitely listen to.
Well, I mean, you always tell me about how much you listen to them in the car.
I mean, I do.
I am spiritually Alan Jones.
You're basically Alan Jones.
Look, it is a guilty pleasure of mine to listen to some shock jocks on the radio. I will.
Guilty pleasure.
Guilty pleasure, you know.
Remember that time you made us listen to Corey Bernardi's podcast for an hour?
That's right, we did.
Do that.
Deadlock traffic.
On the drive.
Your daily dose of common sense of Corey Bernardi. That's what I used to listen to.
Get him on the podcast.
17 and 18.
Get him on the podcast.
We're
not opposed to hearing our conservative voices. Let that be known.
No, exactly. We would love Corey Bernardi.
Corey,
get on.
Corey, how are you, mate? Come on.
That's a good way to make it in a nice, inviting environment for him. Olivia, final thoughts.
Oh shit, I'm allowed to speak.
I honestly thought he was going to forget.
Yeah, I know. I was like,
me forgetting?
You do that often.
I mean, I do, but like not for this context.
I think to be the contrarian, I think this shambles that we're seeing right now offers a glimmer of hope, because now we're actually seeing people critically engage with the issues at hand rather than focusing on petty party politics. There is some of that, but yeah, it's, like I say, and with the with Jacinta Price having the seat in the Senate as well, like you say, we're breaking down this preconceived notion that Indigenous people live as a monolith and think as a monolith. So it is nice to see varying opinions and, again, like that critical engagement with the issue. So that's a glimmer of hope.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad someone had to say, because I felt like I need to give the Liberals a little bit easier on the Liberals this episode.
Yeah, I feel like we did that with Julie and Lisa and Ken White. You know, but I think, I think I agree with pretty much everything all of you said, basically, as much of a kind of a cop-out answer that is. I mean, I don't really have anything new to bring to the
lack of critical thinking spotted.
Damn. No, I criticise everyone else for lack of critical thinking. Now I can't do it myself. But I think the one thing to add is I think that the Liberals under Dutton, it's almost kind of poetic in a way, in a weird way. And this is kind of what I mean. It's kind of a bit out there, but it's my kind of thought process. I think that Dutton so desperately wanted to be the Prime Minister, so much so that he would think, dethroning Malcolm Turnbull was going to be the way to go. And obviously ScoMo went through the wing. Now he finally gets his chance to become the potential next Prime Minister, but now he's in a party room that the more that he listens to, or the more that he appeals to them, is just, it's a dwindling base that obviously has overwhelmingly rejected his leadership from the Aston By-election.
He's between a rock and a hard place.
Well, a very hard place. It's a lose-lose situation for him, because the more that he appeals to the party room, the more down the drain the Liberal Party goes. But at the same time, if he tries to rebel against the party room and he tries to, make some positions of his own that are a bit more progressive, a bit more, of that, as much as I hate to say it, like that left-wing type of ideology, I think even then there'll be leadership contests, because Dutton isn't a real conservative and he shouldn't be there. And, after Malcolm Turnbull left, most of the other Libs have basically, it's so interesting, because Bridget Archer said that one of the only moderate young Libs, other than Simon Birmingham and a few others, still exist in there. She was asked on the ABC saying that, do you think the Liberal Party in its current form is a good government? Bless you. Sorry. Is a good government to is in its right to govern in its current state? And she went, no, it's not. So, which is a bold thing to say when you're in the party.
Yeah.
But also shows that
she's
incredibly
not afraid to be bold. She crossed that full fire cap.
Exactly. She's incredibly brave. So, especially given that secret meeting with Josh Frydenberg and Scott Morrison after that whole thing. But anyway, that's a whole different thing. It's a whole different issue. We're unfortunately out of time, but thank you all so much for listening to the AuspolChats podcast. We'll hopefully be back in the next fortnight to discuss whatever issues that may arise between 6 months from the issues that
2 months or 3 months, Luke?
Well, it's been a month, but hopefully let's not make it 6 or 12
or 7
like it was,
like
or 7 like last time. We're getting better with that. But previously it was 7 months. Now it's only been a month, so hopefully we can get it in a fortnight, just like the game Fortnite. But and
with that, I'd like to announce the end of this round Auspol.
You don't know that out of the podcast.
No, I know, but that's what goes to show. It's a bit down the hill. Never speaks of that.
But again, thank you all so much for tuning in. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. And make sure to get all the latest updates about what's happening. But until then, thank you all so much for tuning in, and make sure to take care out there, guys.
Bye bye.
Good job, guys.
Good work.
We did it. We did it. We did it. We did it. We did it.
Get in, Luke.